The remnants of Nicole blow through Atlantic Canada on tonight's tropical weather bulletin. And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical weather bulletin for November 13th. Active right now are the remnants of Nicole and a new tropical storm in the western Pacific. Yamaneko has been named in the far eastern part of the basin, not far from the international dateline and very far from any significant land masses. It's the 88th storm to form this year around the world. In the Atlantic, it's day 166 of hurricane season, and is the end in sight? Well, the remnants of Nicole, the end is in sight for that system. It's just blowing through the Newfoundland right now, and elsewhere there is nothing expected to form in the next 5 days. The eastern Pacific is similarly calm now on day 183 of hurricane season. No areas of interest and no signs of life anytime soon in this basin either. It's a very desolate region of the world right now, that it usually is around this time of year. The western Pacific has tropical storm Yamaneko at quite a high latitude for a formation at least. It's around 20 to 25 degrees north and just around 170 degrees east there, moving slowly, and eventually it's going to head further north and not get particularly strong. In the southern hemisphere, we're looking at an area of interest down in the Indian Ocean, a 20% chance that could end up somewhere between the Cocos and Christmas Islands, and we've also got an area of interest in the North Indian Ocean that we've given 10% for later potential developments. Let's check satellite imagery right now then, and this is what the Atlantic is looking like. You can see the shadow of Nicole in the distance there, moving on through Canada. The United States is now very much clear of the storm, and you can see behind it pretty calm in terms of its pattern. Of course, the US getting the cold wave right now. The eastern Pacific still very quiet here as well. There's really not very much going on, just a few little islands of thunderstorms that are blowing up, keeping the intertropical convergence zone not completely dead there, but dry air is definitely dominating the eastern Pacific. Let's get a closer look at Nicole on the infrared imagery here, and you can see just exactly where the parts of the storm are now. The center is displaced well to the left hand side, if indeed it does still have a center, and all of the convection there is being strong across the North Atlantic to do with Nicole. Now we can take a look just on the very edge of GOES 17. We can see Yamaneko, and there it is on that infrared imagery, and now on the RGB imagery here you can see how it's looking, rather shrimpish actually, not fully covered in convection there. Looks like the center of circulation is trying to or almost being exposed, so shear doing quite a bit, pushing all that cloud cover northeastwards. The eastern, the Pacific as a whole there, apart from Yamaneko, looking pretty quiet. You can see it all there, and moving back towards the Atlantic, we're looking at this area again. Not too much else going on, a few thunderstorms blowing up over the main development region into the Sargasso Sea, but generally a nice quiet late season picture. Let's have a proper look at the western Pacific as a whole, and you can see it here, Yamaneko on the right hand side, and elsewhere in the Pacific not much going on, a few little fizzles of thunderstorms around Mindanao and towards Borneo, but really not much going on over there. Let's move to the Indian Ocean, and this is what it looks like here, and you can see it's still very much the same as what we were looking at yesterday really. A few thunderstorms blowing up over southern India, and eventually something is going to get going on that southern hemisphere side, a really massive gyre there you could say of thunderstorms all across the eastern part of the Indian Ocean there. The Australian region, there's quite a bit of thunderstorms blowing up and pushing out towards the eastern half of the country into New South Wales and into Queensland, but most of that is still in the interior locations, although some of it is headed now towards Sydney today, and towards the eastern part there, a front that's moving through Fiji. Sea surface temperatures right now in the eastern Pacific still are fairly warm, getting towards 30 degrees there, still over 28, over 29 probably as well, and the loop current's still active, and the Gulf Stream for the Atlantic still looking good as well. So late season activity can't be ruled out, with the Caribbean Sea as warm as it is, around 29 degrees Celsius. Over the Bahamas, most of that area is still around 28, so looking decent right out into the Atlantic. Can't rule out late season activity. North Indian Ocean, still decent temperatures, around 28 to 29 degrees, a little bit cooler in the far north. The southern hemisphere there, it's warming up there as well. Where that potential system is, it'll be around 28 degrees for a time. Western Pacific still boiling hot as well, over 28 degrees Celsius as a rule there in the Philippine Sea, and where Yamaneko is right now, it's around 28 degrees Celsius, just dropping down to 27. It actually doesn't have that long. If it starts to move north, it probably only has a day or so before it enters cold waters. The anomalies though are warmer than average, so if it wasn't for that, Yamaneko probably wouldn't be there. The eastern Pacific around average overall. In the Atlantic it is well above average, particularly in the subtropics, so we can't rule out late season activity out at sea, which is the most common place apart from the Caribbean for the Atlantic late season. In the oceanic heat content here, you can still see the Caribbean all around Jamaica there, and the western tip of Cuba still looking very, very good indeed. Into the eastern Pacific, not looking very good, but it never did all year. And in the western Pacific, it's gone off to boil quite a bit, but still looking pretty decent. Guam westwards basically, and up the rest of the Mariana Islands. Good oceanic heat content, and in the lower latitudes of course. Let's check the GFS computer model then for the next few days, and this is what's showing out for Nicole there. The remnants sweeping across the Atlantic with hurricane force winds for a time, and then getting entangled in another much larger extratropical cyclone, and then it loses its identity and eventually ends up towards Iceland. Watch it again there, you can see it swinging off towards the east, affecting the Azores with tropical storm force winds, and then a band moving through Ireland as it merges with a much larger extratropical system. And this is Yamaneko in the western Pacific there. You can see GFS not fond of it lasting very long, turns post-tropical, might reach hurricane force winds, looks like it does, as it merges with another system and it dies off just near the Aleutian Islands there. And that is quite different from what the model was showing yesterday. It wanted hurricane force all the way up through into the Bering Sea, but this later model run shows much the opposite because of another system blocking it to the north by the looks of things. So that's that one. And in the Indian Ocean, let's watch for these two potential systems. You'll see one either side of the equator, North Indian Ocean, South Indian Ocean. You can see them both forming there and spinning away from each other. Two different tropical cyclones. They both are nameable there in that model run. That's up to 5 days, so the chances are increasing. GFS is the most aggressive out of any of the global models for this right now for both systems. So that's why we've rounded on 20% on the southern system and only 10% on the northern one right now. It's a bit too early. And look at the rainfall expectations for the Atlantic Canada area. This is the next 7 days, so it's Nicole, but also a couple of more systems that move through in that period. And we'll take a look at what the rainfall totals amount to. Most of it is Nicole induced, and this will fall quite quickly over the next 12 to 24 hours. Looking to get around an inch to an inch and a half in Maine, getting up to around 2 inches in New Brunswick, and for Nova Scotia around about 1.5 inches. But it's Newfoundland that gets the highest amounts, 4 inches there on the southern tips of Newfoundland and towards St. John's. The northern tip, in contrast, there only getting just over 1 inch. So certainly differing fortunes for everyone in the path of the remnants of Nicole in terms of rainfall. Winds will be getting up to probably around 50 to 60 miles per hour. Let's check the longer range. This is day 5 through 10. You can see the Indian Ocean system there, a very broad one, tropical storm. It just about makes it into India there, not far from Visakhapatnam. And in the West Pacific, in the later part of that 10-day period, another large tropical cyclone develops and remains very weak, but might just get itself on the naming list and will gradually move northwestwards through the South China Sea, will eventually probably pose a risk towards Vietnam. Southern Hemisphere, watch this little system, moves near the Cocos Islands, but eventually turns northeastwards and heads much closer to Christmas Island towards the end of that 10-day period, stalling a little bit and going the wrong way for a while there as it continues north and then eastwards. Sorry about that, it has to happen. This is the day 5 to 10 period. Getting quite strong towards the end of that period there as well for a brief moment there, getting almost to hurricane status. Interesting. Well, at this point you can scan the barcode and take a look at the Force 13 merch store and all of our products on offer right now, including full season and individual animations bespoke at your request, and are still waiting for Hone t-shirts, which are probably going to freeze over later than hell at this rate, with Hone nowhere in sight. In the Scilly range, that's day 10 to 16, you can see both these systems, the first one moving along Indonesia and the other one in the Western Pacific surviving for a little while. And does it re-emerge towards the end of that loop there? And another system emerging south of Indonesia as well. Are they both the same system? That's going to be one to look at there. West Pacific, that one is the same system, moving down the coast of Vietnam, non-tropical by that point, and then down near Indonesia. I think that is also the same system too, that ends up moving westwards. That would be quite remarkable. Well, Hurricane Week is only how long away now? 15 days, not very far away at all. It's getting very exciting. We're halfway through production right now. We just reached the halfway point today, and so it's looking good for this year's feature. On this day, on November 13th, 1977, we had a Category 4 typhoon active by the name of Kim, and it was just off the coast of the Philippines, off Luzon. That storm peaked with winds of 145 miles per hour and was just starting to weaken a little bit at this point in time as it headed towards the west. Elsewhere, nothing was active. There was a disturbance just to the southwest of India, which would eventually form, and there was the remnants of Cyclone Tom, which were down in the Coral Sea. Well then, who will get our 89th storm name this year? Who knows? The next name in the Atlantic is Owen, in the Eastern Pacific it's Seymour, and in the Central Pacific it is still Hone. In the Western Pacific we've had Yamaneko now, so the next name is Pakar, and in the North Indian Ocean it's Mandos, although it might be a little while until we get that one. I remember Sitrang, it felt like we were waiting for ages watching the models have that on display for weeks before it actually did form. And in the Southern Hemisphere we've got Daria next up in the Australian region, Chaniso in the Southwest Indian Ocean, and Harley in the South Pacific. That's all for tonight's Tropical Weather Bulletin. We'll be back again tomorrow night.